The sky hadn't been blue for a decade. It was a permanent, bruised twilight, a sick smear of rust and iodine that hung over the skeletal remains of Denver. We called it the choke. It was the air. You see, the first thing they changed. They didn't arrive with lasers and declarations of war. They arrived like a change in the weather. One day, the sky was ours. The next, it belonged to the pillars. There were 12 of them, spaced evenly across the globe, titans of black, unreflective metal that had descended from orbit with the slow, indifferent gravity of a dying star. They didn't land so much as they merged with the planet, their bases sinking miles into the crust, their spires scraping the edge of space. They were silent, utterly and completely. They didn't communicate. They didn't negotiate. They simply began their work. Gigantic, planet-sized engines of transformation, humming with a purpose we couldn't comprehend. The choke was just a byproduct of their atmospheric processors, a slow-acting poison that thinned the oxygen and laced every breath with metallic dust. It made your teeth ache and your bones feel brittle. A constant reminder that the world you were born into was being systematically erased and rewritten for a new, unseen occupant. My name is Alistair, and I was a structural engineer before the world ended. I used to design bridges, things meant to connect people, to last for centuries. Now, I pick through the bones of my own civilization, a scavenger they call a rust jack. My crew and I operated out of the old NORAD complex, deep in the granite guts of Cheyenne Mountain. It was one of the few places the choke couldn't fully penetrate, and its labyrinthine corridors housed a few thousand survivors, the last ragged pulse of humanity in the Rockies. We weren't soldiers. The armies of the world had thrown themselves at the pillars in the first year, a futile, heroic, and monumentally stupid gesture. Bullets, bombs, even tactical nukes had done nothing but leave faint scorch marks on their alien hulls, like smudges on a god's thumbprint. The pillars hadn't even retaliated. They simply continued their work. Their automated drones, we called them sweepers, methodically dismantling the ruins and absorbing the raw material. The sweepers ignored us. For the most part, we were irrelevant, part of the planet's bothersome biomass that would eventually be filtered out. Fighting them was pointless. Survival was about being quiet, staying small, and knowing which shadows to hide in. Our mission that cycle was simple: a supply run to the ruins of the Air Force Academy for salvageable cryopumps and power converters. We needed them to keep our own air recyclers from failing, a fate that meant a slow, suffocating death in our mountain tomb. There were 3 of us. Maya, a former astrophysicist who could coax life out of dead circuits with nothing but a pair of pliers and a string of whispered curses. She was the brains, the one who saw the universe in terms of physics and probabilities, a cold comfort in a world governed by neither. Then there was Ben, big, silent Ben, a firefighter from Colorado Springs who had lost his voice in a chemical fire during the early days of the choke. He didn't need to speak. His hands, calloused and sure, could brace a collapsing tunnel or strip a vehicle for parts with equal precision. He was our strength, the anchor that kept Maya and me from getting lost in the technical details or the suffocating despair. And I was the leader, the one who knew the ruins, the one who could read the stories in the rust and rubble and decide whether a path was a shortcut or a tomb. We moved through the skeletal city in our custom rig, An old armored transport we called the Pig, its electric engine whining softly in the oppressive silence. The Academy grounds were an eerie ghost yard, its proud modernist architecture crumbling under a blanket of orange dust. The great glass chapel looked like a shattered rib cage, its aluminum spires bent and broken. We were working on a service entrance to the main reactor building when the ground began to tremble. It was a familiar feeling. The deep, resonant hum of a sweeper patrol. We froze. The Pig was hidden in the shell of an old hangar, but the sweepers had sensors that could pick up a watch battery from a mile away. We crouched behind a pile of concrete debris, our breath held tight in our chests, the metallic tang of the air sharp on our tongues. The sweeper came into view, a monstrous, multi-limbed machine the size of a house. It moved with an unnerving, fluid grace, its crab-like legs carrying its spherical body over the rubble without disturbing a single stone. Its purpose was deconstruction. It would lock onto a building, and within minutes, the structure would be reduced to a pile of sorted, raw materials, which were then transported by smaller drones back to the nearest pillar. We were beneath its notice, usually. This time was different. As the sweeper passed a collapsed dormitory, a secondary tremor shook the ground, a deep, grinding crack from beneath the earth, a sinkhole, a geological casualty of the pillar's deep drilling, opened up without warning. The sweeper, for all its alien grace, was caught off guard. One of its legs plunged into the collapsing earth, and the machine listed, its perfect balance thrown into chaos. It emitted a shriek, a sound that wasn't auditory, but vibratory, a discordant blast of pure data that rattled our bones and made our fillings buzz. Its other legs scrambled for purchase, tearing great gashes in the earth, but its own weight was its enemy. With a final, groaning tear of metal, the sweeper crashed onto its side, half submerged in the newly formed chasm. A plume of vapor hissed from a ruptured conduit, and then it fell silent. We stayed hidden for a full hour, waiting for other sweepers to arrive, for the machine to self-repair. For anything. Nothing happened. The fallen giant lay still, a monument to a rare, cosmic accident. "Its core is offline," Maya whispered, her eyes glued to the screen of her wrist-mounted diagnostic tool. The fall must have triggered a system-wide failsafe. Power is rerouted to emergency beacons, but the main processing unit, it's dark. This was unheard of. Sweepers didn't just break. We had seen them take direct missile hits and barely slow down. To see one lying helpless was like seeing a mountain fall over. Ben looked at me, his wide eyes asking the question. I knew what they were both thinking. The technology inside that thing was a black box, a treasure trove we couldn't even dream of. A single power cell from a sweeper could run our entire mountain complex for a year. Its armor could shield us from the choke indefinitely, but getting to it was a monumental risk. "No," I said, my voice raspy. "We stick to the plan. Get the pumps and we go. We don't poke the monsters, sleeping or not." Ben nodded slowly, accepting the logic, but Maya didn't look away from the wreck. "Alistair, its maintenance hatch is damaged. It's partially open. The internal network is isolated. But if I can get a hardline connection—" "To do what?" I snapped, a little too harshly. "Take it for a joyride. We don't have the tools, the knowledge, the time." "We don't need to understand all of it," she countered, her voice rising with an excitement I hadn't heard in years. "We just need a piece. A blueprint, a schematic, anything that tells us how they work. Don't you see, for 10 years, we've been living in the dark, guessing at what these things are. This is the first time we've had a chance to look under the hood. Her words hung in the dusty air. She was right. We were like cavemen studying a spaceship by looking at its shadow. Every day was a struggle to maintain what little we had left of the old world. A losing battle against entropy. We weren't fighting back. We were just managing our own extinction. The thought of my son, Leo, flashed in my mind. He would have been 15 this year. He died in the first winter of the choke, his small lungs too weak to fight the alien air. I had promised his mother I would survive, that I would endure. But what was the point of enduring in a world that was being slowly strangled? Was this not a chance, however slim, to do more than just endure? Was this a chance to understand the enemy and maybe, just maybe, find a way to make them bleed? Ben saw the conflict in my face. He put a heavy hand on my shoulder and gave a single, firm nod toward the downed sweeper. It wasn't a suggestion, it was a statement. We had to try. The decision felt like stepping off a cliff in the dark. I took a deep breath, the grit coating my tongue. "All right," I said, the word feeling heavy, dangerous. "Maya, you have 30 minutes. Get what you can. And we are gone. Ben, you're on watch. Your rifle is useless against another sweeper, but you'll see it coming before we do. Yell. Throw a rock. I don't care. Just give us a warning." We moved like ghosts through the rubble, our boots making soft crunching sounds in the orange dust. The downed sweeper was even more immense up close. Its hull was a mosaic of interlocking panels, with no visible seams or welds, the metal cool and smooth to the touch. The damaged maintenance hatch was a jagged tear near its central sphere, a gaping wound leaking a faint, ozone-like smell. Maya scrambled inside without a moment's hesitation, her small form disappearing into the alien darkness. I stood guard at the opening, my pulse rifle feeling like a child's toy against the backdrop of this leviathan. Inside, Maya worked with frantic precision. I could hear the clicks and whirs of her tools, the soft murmur of her voice as she interfaced with the alien machine. "It's a different architecture entirely," she muttered over the short-range comm in my ear. "Not binary. It's crystalline. Data stored in resonance patterns. I'm trying to initiate a raw data dump, but I don't know what I'm grabbing. It's like trying to drink from a fire hose." Minutes stretched into an eternity. The silence of the ruins pressed in on me. Every gust of wind sounded like the approach of another machine. Every scrape of metal from inside the hatch made me jump. My eyes scanned the horizon, searching for movement, for the telltale shimmer of an active sweeper's energy field. Then Ben's voice, a harsh, guttural croak he only used for emergencies, echoed from his perch 100 yards away. "Sweep north." My blood ran cold. I looked north and saw it. A distant but unmistakable shape moving along the ruined highway, heading in our general direction. It was still miles away, but it was moving fast. "Maya, time's up. We have to go now." I yelled into the comm. "Almost there." Her voice was strained. "The main data core is partitioning. It's protecting itself. But I got a fragment. A big one. It's Alistair. It looks like a maintenance schedule. A diagnostic routine for the pillar itself. I don't care if it's the goddamn user manual. Get out of there." I scrambled towards the hatch, ready to pull her out myself. Just as I reached it, she came tumbling out, clutching a data slate to her chest like a holy relic. "I have it," she gasped, her face pale with a mixture of terror and triumph. "Let's go." We sprinted back to the pig, our lungs burning, the alarm in our heads screaming louder than any siren. We threw ourselves into the vehicle, and I slammed the accelerator, the electric engine whining in protest as we tore out of the hangar and raced south, away from the approaching sweeper, away from the fallen giant, carrying with us a stolen secret from a silent god. Back in the clam-just recycled air of Cheyenne Mountain, the weight of what we had done began to settle in. We had broken the #1 rule of survival. We had poked the monster. But as Maya worked to decrypt the data fragment, an impossible idea began to take shape. It wasn't a weapon schematic or a tactical layout. It was something far more mundane and far more valuable. It was a custodial log, a routine for regulating the colossal fusion core deep within the pillar, a process that vented superheated plasma through a series of thermal conduits that ran the length of the machine's structure, from its core in the planet's mantle to its peak in the upper atmosphere. And the log showed a flaw, a tiny, insignificant vulnerability in the system. During the hourly venting cycle, for a period of exactly 97 seconds, the magnetic containment field of a specific exhaust conduit, number 718, fluctuated to conserve energy. For 97 seconds, that conduit was vulnerable to a precise thermal shock. A shock that, if applied correctly, wouldn't just damage the conduit. The simulation Maya ran showed that it would trigger a feedback loop, a cascading failure that would overload the entire regulatory system. The pillar wouldn't just shut down. It would tear itself apart from the inside out. We were looking at the impossible a kill switch, a single, tiny crack in the armor of a god. The knowledge was terrifying. It was a seed of hope so dangerous it felt like poison. Ben, Maya, and I stood in the dim light of the command center, the holographic projection of the pillar's inner workings glowing between us. We had a choice. We could bury this information, pretend we never found it, and continue our slow, managed extinction. We could live out our days in the shadow of the machine, cowering in the dark. Or we could take the single, infinitesimal chance we had been given. We could gather every ounce of explosive, every joule of energy, every scrap of courage we had left, and plan an infiltration into the heart of the pillar itself. We could try to strike a blow against the silent, indifferent force that was strangling our world. It was a suicide mission, a fool's errand, a final, desperate scream into the void. Looking at the grim determination in Maya's eyes and the steady, unwavering resolve in Ben's, I knew there was no choice at all. We weren't just going to survive anymore. We were going to fight back. Our target was no longer a stockpile of spare parts or a can of food. Our target was the pillar on the horizon, the monstrous machine that blotted out the sun. We were going to make it bleed. The afterglow of the holographic pillar painted our faces in stark blues and reds, a silent testament to the madness we had just embraced. For a full minute, the only sound in the NORAD command center was the hum of the recycler fans and the frantic beating of my own heart. We had a target, a plan born from a 1 in a billion fluke, but the path from this cold, granite room to the heart of that alien behemoth was an unwritten map of impossible obstacles. The first was the most daunting. We were not in charge. Cheyenne Mountain was a fragile ecosystem of nearly 3,000 souls governed by a 5-person council led by Director Evans. Evans was a man carved from pragmatism and loss, a former Air Force colonel who had watched his command and the world get dismantled by an enemy that never even acknowledged his existence. His guiding principle was the preservation of the flickering candle of human life, and our plan was to douse that candle in gasoline and use it as a torch. Convincing him would be harder than killing the pillar itself. We found him in the hydroponics bay, inspecting a row of struggling potato plants under the harsh glare of UV lamps. He didn't look up as we approached, his focus absolute on a single withered leaf. "The pumps from the academy are working," he said, his voice a low, gravelly hum. "You bought us another 6 months of breathable air. Good work." I took a breath, the recycled air tasting stale. "We found something else out there. Director," I laid it all out for him. Right there among the potato vines. Maya projected the data from her slate onto the damp concrete wall, the sweeper's internal logs, the pillar's architecture, the 97-second window of vulnerability in conduit 718. She explained the physics of the cascading feedback loop, her voice clear and confident, stripping the plan of its insanity and dressing it in the cold, hard language of science. Ben stood beside her, his massive frame a silent, unmovable declaration of intent. Evans listened without interruption, his face an unreadable mask, his eyes never leaving the projection. When Maya finished, he finally looked away from the wall and pinched the dead leaf from the plant, crumbling it to dust between his thumb and forefinger. "A thermal shock," he said, his tone flat. "You want to deliver a precise thermal shock to a target 6,000 feet up the side of a structure we know nothing about, based on a data fragment from a broken-down garbage truck." We know it's a long shot," I countered, trying to keep the desperation out of my voice. "But it's a shot. What's the alternative? Director, we wait. We tend our potatoes until the choke seeps through the last filter, or the sweepers finally decide to tidy up this mountain. We're not living. We're waiting to die. This is the first chance we've had to do anything else." He turned to face me, and for the first time, I saw the immense weariness in his eyes, the weight of a decade of managed decline. "Every person in this mountain is alive because I have never, not once, taken a long shot. Alistair, I have made the hard choices. I've rationed food, water, and hope. I have traded freedom for survival. And you're asking me to risk every single one of those lives on a theory. What happens when you fail? The pillars have ignored us because we are ants. What happens when an ant bites? Do you think they won't retaliate? Do you think they can't just crack this mountain open like a walnut?" The question hung in the humid air, a perfectly logical and devastating counterpoint to our desperate hope. But Maya stepped forward. "With respect, Director, your assumption is that they are capable of retaliation in a way we'd recognize. For 10 years, they have operated on a strict, unchanging program. They terraform. Their drones deconstruct. They do not deviate. They are not an army. They are a machine. The data suggests the pillar is an automated system. If we succeed, there may be no one to retaliate. The machine will simply be broken." Evans looked from Maya back to me, his gaze lingering. He was a military man. He understood calculated risks. But this was something else entirely. It was a leap of faith. "Even if I approve this," he said, his voice dropping, "what do you propose to use? We don't have a weapon that can deliver that kind of focused energy. We barely have enough power to run these lights. It was the opening I needed." We build one, I said. Before the world ended, I built bridges. Maya mapped pulsars. Ben put out fires. We're not soldiers, but we know how things are put together, and we know how they fall apart. There's a place. The old NREL facility in Golden. They were working on experimental thermal photovoltaics and concentrated solar power. They would have had the components we need, high-yield capacitors, crystalline focusing lenses, maybe even a portable fusion core we could adapt. Let us strip that facility for parts. Give us a workshop and the power to run it. If we can't build the device, the mission is a bust anyway. No harm. No foul. I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Not agreement, but the begrudging respect of one problem solver for another. He looked at Ben, who met his gaze without blinking. He looked at Maya, whose fierce intelligence burned brighter than the UV lamps. Then he looked back at me. He was silent for a long time. The only sound the drip of irrigation lines. "You get one run," he said finally, the words tasting like ash. "Take the pig and a 4-person security detail. You have 2 cycles. If you're not back, we seal the doors. If you come back with what you need, we'll talk again. But Alistair, if you bring any trouble back with you, I will vent your entire team into the choke myself." Are we clear? The trip to Golden was a descent into a deeper circle of hell. The choke was thicker there, closer to the pillar's base, and the ruins of the suburbs were more thoroughly dismantled. It was a landscape of foundations and ghosts. The NREL facility stood on a windswept mesa, its glass towers shattered, its solar fields a graveyard of broken panels. We left the pig hidden in a ravine and moved in on foot, the 4 security personnel fanning out, their pulse rifles scanning the horizon. The place was eerily quiet, picked over by scavengers years ago. But the deep labs, the ones we needed, were sealed behind reinforced blast doors in the sub-basement. It took Ben and me 4 hours with a plasma cutter to slice through the first one, the air growing thick with the smell of scorched metal. Inside, we found a mausoleum of forgotten science, dust-covered oscilloscopes, racks of silent servers, and schematics for a future that never happened. Maya moved through it all like a wraith, her diagnostic tool humming as she scanned for the components on her list. We hit the jackpot in the primary research lab, a prototype for a deep-bore drilling initiator. It was designed to use a focus beam of thermal energy to fracture rock miles underground. At its heart was a set of 6 synthetic sapphire lenses and a magnetic containment chamber for a short-burst plasma charge. It was perfect. It was our weapon. We were hauling the main capacitor bank up the service stairs when the ground shuddered. It was the same deep, resonant hum we'd felt at the academy. A sweeper, one of the security team, a young kid named Miller, peered through a crack in a boarded-up window. "It's on the mesa," he whispered, his voice tight with fear. "Scanning the main tower. It hasn't seen us." We froze. Halfway up the stairwell, the capacitor weighing a literal ton between the 4 of us. We couldn't run, and we couldn't hide it. We were trapped. The sweeper moved with that same terrifying grace, its sensor arrays glowing with a soft, internal light as it cataloged the ruin. Then it stopped. Its spherical body swiveled slowly, its gaze sweeping across the building we were in. A high-frequency ping echoed through the structure, a sound that was felt more than heard. It knew we were here. "It's probing the structure," Maya said, her eyes wide. "Its orders are to deconstruct. We're just biomass inside. It's not hunting us. It's scheduling us for demolition." Before any of us could react, a section of the roof above us groaned and then ripped away as if peeled by an invisible hand. Dust and debris rained down. The sweeper was starting its work. "Leave it," I yelled, letting go of the capacitor. "Everyone out, now." We scrambled down the stairs, but the main exit was blocked by a mountain of collapsed concrete. The sweeper was dismantling the building around us, methodical and implacable. We were going to be crushed and sorted along with the rest of the rubble. It was Ben who saved us. While we looked for an escape, he had run back up the stairs. He wasn't trying to save the capacitor. He was looking at the massive I-beams that formed the building's skeleton, the ones the sweeper was now targeting. With a guttural roar, he wedged the head of a plasma cutter into the joint of the primary support beam above us and fired it up. It wasn't a calculated engineering move. It was a desperateness primal act of defiance. He wasn't trying to cut through it. He was weakening it, changing its structural integrity. The sweeper, following its rigid programming, sent a vibrational pulse through the beam, expecting it to shear in a predictable way. But with Ben's cut, the beam didn't shear. It buckled. The entire weight of the western wall, no longer supported, shifted and then collapsed outwards, away from us, in a thundering avalanche of steel and concrete. The sweeper was directly in the path of the collapse. For a split second, its programming seemed to falter. It tried to scuttle backward, but it was too slow. Tons of rubble slammed into it, crushing two of its legs and sending it reeling. It wasn't destroyed, not even close, but it was damaged. Its primary objective interrupted by an unforeseen structural failure. It emitted that same discordant shriek of pure data we had heard before and began to limp away, dragging its broken limbs behind it. It had a new priority returned to the pillar for repairs. It had forgotten all about us. We had survived. And we still had our prize, back within the mountain's granite embrace. Our success at NREL earned us a new kind of currency, cautious optimism. Evan, true to his word, gave us the workshop and the power we needed. The project became a focal point for the entire community. People who hadn't had a purpose beyond survival for a decade suddenly had a mission. Retired machinists helped Ben fabricate the housing for the device. Electrical engineers helped Maya calibrate the capacitor banks. Even the children helped, cleaning and polishing the sapphire lenses until they shone with a dangerous, otherworldly light. We called it the Lancet. It was an ugly, utilitarian thing. A heavy tripod-mounted cannon connected by thick armored cables to a humming power core. It was a weapon made of scrap and hope. While they built, I planned. I spent every waking hour with the holographic projection of the pillar, tracing potential ascent routes. I was a bridge builder again, but my bridge was a vertical path up the side of a monolith. I found a route, a series of external power conduits, maintenance ladders used by automated repair drones, and structural support spars that crisscrossed the pillar's hull like a spider's web. It was a treacherous, exposed climb of over a mile, a vertical marathon through the choke, but it was possible. It would lead us directly to a maintenance platform just below the exhaust vent for conduit 718. The night before we were scheduled to leave, Evans found me in the empty command center, staring at the glowing hologram. He didn't say anything for a while, just stood beside me, watching the simulated plasma pulse through the alien machine. I spoke to Miller. He said, finally, The kid from the security detail. He told me what you all did out there. What Ben did. He paused. For 10 years, I've been telling these people to be quiet, to be small, to hide. I taught them that survival was the only victory that mattered. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe there's a difference between surviving and being alive. He reached into his pocket and placed a small, tarnished object on the console next to me. It was an old silver Zippo lighter, the kind my grandfather used to carry. On its face was the faded insignia of the United States Air Force. It was my father's, Evans said. It hasn't had any fluid in it for years, but he always said it was good for one thing, starting a fire when you need one most. Go start a fire. Alistair. The next morning, our team assembled at the main blast doors. There were 8 of us in total. My original crewmate, Maya, and Ben, and 5 volunteers, all climbers and structural workers from the old days, people who understood rigging and heights. The Lancet was secured on a modified cargo dolly, its power core humming with contained energy. The mood was grim but resolute. There were no grand speeches, no tearful goodbyes, just quiet nods and clasped hands from the small crowd that had gathered to see us off. As the massive doors of Cheyenne Mountain began to grind open, a sliver of the bruised, orange sky appeared, a wound in the world. We stepped forward, leaving the safety of our tomb and walking out into the choke. The pig's engine hummed to life, and we began our slow, final journey toward the black, silent pillar that dominated the horizon, a tiny, defiant procession on its way to kill a god. The journey from the mountain to the pillar was a pilgrimage through our own graveyard. The pig moved at a crawl through the skeletal remains of Colorado Springs, its tires crunching over the asphalt bones of dead highways. The choke was a physical presence here, a suffocating blanket that muted sound and painted the world in shades of rust and despair. The pillar grew with every mile, a black, monolithic spear thrust into the heart of the sky. So vast, it defied perspective. It didn't just dominate the horizon. It was the horizon. Its scale was a form of psychological warfare, a constant, silent declaration of our own insignificance. We were a microbe approaching a mountain, and the weight of that truth pressed down on us, heavier than any blast shield. We navigated a maze of collapsed overpasses and vehicle graveyards. In one valley, thousands of cars and trucks were piled in a neat, geometric mound nearly half a mile high, a bizarre tombstone for the age of motion. The sweepers hadn't just cleared them, they had sorted and stacked them with an architect's precision, a purpose we couldn't fathom. It was unsettling. Another piece of the alien puzzle that suggested a mind at work, even if it was a mind we could never hope to comprehend. To bypass one such monument, we were forced into the storm drains, a dark, claustrophobic detour through the city's concrete bowels. The pig's headlights cut a weak yellow path through the oppressive blackness, revealing the high water marks of the world before. A ghost tide of forgotten lives. For 12 hours, we were moles. Our only guide, the pre-choke city schematics on Maya's slate. When we finally emerged, surfacing through a collapsed subway entrance, we were there. The base of the pillar. No picture, no simulation, could have prepared us for the reality. It was not a building. It was a geographic feature. The base spread for miles. A seamless, unpolished black material that seemed to drink the weak. Orange light. The air here was strangely clear, shimmering with a faint energy field. This was the exclusion zone, a sterile perimeter that extended for 1,000 yards around the pillar's base. Anything that crossed it, birds, dust devils, scraps of windblown debris, was instantly vaporized by unseen energies. It was the pillar's immune system. But my study of the schematics had revealed a weakness, not in the field itself, but in its emitters. They were calibrated to organic matter and unstructured debris. A dense, metallic object of sufficient mass, moving at a slow, constant velocity, might pass through. The pig was our key. We stripped the truck of everything non-essential, piling our gear, including the dismantled Lancet, onto its flatbed. Then, with its engine set to the lowest possible output, we sent it rolling forward, unmanned, a ghost ship sailing into a sea of energy. We held our breath, watching from the edge of the ruin. The pig touched the shimmering air of the zone, and for a heart-stopping second, nothing happened. Then, with a low hum, it passed through, its metal frame causing a momentary ripple in the field. It rolled another 50 yards into the sterile zone before coming to a gentle stop. It was our beachhead. Now, all we had to do was cross the kill zone on foot. The plan was simple, brutal, and hinged on a sliver of Maya's theoretical physics. The field would vaporize us, but a human body, shielded by a dense, grounded metallic mass, might survive the transit. Our shields were the salvaged blast doors from the NREL facility, each weighing over 800 pounds. Ben had rigged them with rudimentary harnesses. The 8 of us, huddled behind these massive slabs of steel, pushed them through the dust like giant plows, inch by painful inch. The push across the 1,000-yard zone took 3 hours. The air grew hotter, crackling with static. The metal of the shields hummed, growing warm against our shoulders. It was a journey of pure faith and brute force, a testament to Ben's unyielding strength and the desperation that fueled us all. We collapsed on the other side, our muscles screaming, our lungs raw. But we were alive. We were inside. We were touching the skin of the god we had come to kill. The climb began at what we designated Point Zero, the base of the series of maintenance ladders and conduits I had mapped. The surface of the pillar was cool and utterly smooth, like polished obsidian. It felt ancient and eternal. We roped up, the 8 of us, a tiny chain of humanity against the impossible vertical wall. The Lancet, broken down into its 3 heaviest components, the core, the tripod, and the lens assembly, was hauled up between us, a terrible, sacred burden. The first few thousand feet were a grueling, monotonous ascent. The only sounds were the scrape of our magnetic boots on the hull, the rasp of our breathing through our rebreathers, and the whisper of the toxic wind. The world fell away beneath us, the ruins of Denver shrinking into a dusty map. We were in another realm now, a vertical desert of black metal. It was Cortez, one of the volunteer climbers, who saw the first one. "Movement!" he hissed over the comm, his voice tight. 3 o'clock. Fast. We froze, flattening ourselves against the hull. I saw it a second later. A flash of silver. A small, disc-shaped drone, about the size of a car tire, shot past us, moving with incredible speed and agility. It was a scrubber, one of the pillar's automated maintenance units. It moved along the hull, its underside glowing with a soft blue light as it cleaned or repaired the surface. Its purpose as mundane as it was alien. It paid us no mind. Its programming not equipped to register a cluster of parasites clinging to the outer skin of its host. We learned the pattern. They moved in predictable, sweeping paths, like robotic window washers on the world's tallest building. The key was to stay still, to blend in with the machinery, to become part of the structure. We were ghosts, and as long as we made no sound, no sudden moves, we were invisible. The illusion of safety shattered at 4,000 feet. We were navigating a tricky traverse around a massive cylindrical power regulator when Gia, the youngest of our team, lost her footing. Her magnetic boot slipped on a patch of crystallized residue, and she swung out on her safety line. Her backup carabiner, a piece of old-world steel, clanged loudly against the pillar's hull. The sound was small, insignificant against the vastness of the structure, but in the operational silence, it was a gunshot. 3 scrubbers, patrolling 100 yards below, stopped instantly. Their soft blue lights turned a hard, analytical white. They swiveled in unison and shot upwards towards us, their movements no longer sweeping and graceful, but direct and predatory. "Gia, get back now." I screamed, but it was too late. The lead scrubber reached her in seconds. It didn't have weapons in a conventional sense. A multi-jointed appendage snapped out from its chassis, ending not in a claw, but in a plasma torch. It fired a single, silent, brilliant blue beam. It didn't hit Gia. It hit her safety line. The synthetic rope, capable of holding a truck, vaporized instantly. She was untethered. I saw the look in her eyes for a fraction of a second, a flash of shock, of disbelief. She didn't even have time to scream. She just fell, a small, dark shape tumbling away from the black wall, disappearing into the orange haze of the choke below. The 3 scrubbers hovered for a moment, their white lights scanning the spot where she had been. They registered the anomaly, the organic residue. The severed line had been cleaned. Then their lights switched back to blue, and they resumed their methodical patrol as if nothing had happened. We clung to the wall, paralyzed by a cold, silent horror. The pillar hadn't attacked us. It had tidied up. Gia wasn't an enemy. She was a piece of litter. I don't know how long we stayed there, frozen to the wall. The grief was a physical weight, threatening to pull us all into the abyss. But the mission clock was ticking. The venting cycle for Conduit 718 would happen in less than 2 hours, and it would not wait for us to mourn. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to do, but I keyed the calm. "Keep climbing," I said, my voice a hollow crack. "Don't look down. We do this for her now." We climbed in a grim, wounded silence, the team reduced to 7. Each step was heavier, each breath more ragged. The loss had stripped away the last of our bravado, leaving only a cold, hard resolve. We reached the maintenance platform an hour later. It was a small, grated ledge, no bigger than a truck bed, jutting out from the hull just below our target, a massive, louvered vent 50 feet in diameter. This was it, the place. We unslung the components of the Lancet and began to assemble it, our movements economical and practiced. Ben locked the heavy tripod into place, its magnetic feet clamping to the platform with a solid thud. Maya and I carefully mounted the lens assembly and connected the power cables to the humming core. As the Lancet took shape, a weapon of human ingenuity in this place of alien perfection, I felt a flicker of our old hope return. We had made it. We were here. Maya ran the final diagnostics, her fingers flying across her data slate. "It's perfect," she whispered, her voice filled with a quiet awe. "Power core is stable. Lenses are aligned. Once the vent opens, We'll have a clear shot at the primary thermal regulator inside. The 97-second window starts now." She looked up from her slate, her eyes locking with mine. But her expression wasn't one of triumph. It was one of dawning horror. "Alistair," she said, her voice barely audible over the wind. "While the system is preparing to vent, it's diverting immense power from the secondary systems to the core. It's opening up pathways in their data network that were firewalled before. I'm seeing deeper into the pillar than I thought possible." I looked at her, my hand hovering over the firing stud of the lancet. "What do you see?" She swallowed hard, her face pale. "This isn't just a terraformer. The atmospheric processing, the deconstruction, all of it. It's just step one. It's preparing the environment deep in the core, miles beneath us. The pillar is using the raw materials it has harvested to build something. It's not a machine. The energy signatures are biological." She turned the slate towards me. The image was a complex, rotating schematic of spiraling energy patterns, but at its center was something unmistakable, something that defied all logic. It was a latticework of light, growing, pulsing, forming a shape that resembled a vast, intricate strand of DNA. "It's a nursery," Maya whispered, the words catching in her throat. "This whole planet, it's being turned into a nursery. We're not just fighting a machine. Alistair, we're standing on the shell of an egg." The first deep, resonant hum of the venting cycle began to vibrate up through the platform. The massive louvers of the vent above us started to grind open. Our 97-second window had begun. We had come here to kill a machine, but we had just learned we were about to do something else entirely. The revelation hit us like a physical blow, a punch to the gut that stole the air from our lungs. A nursery, an egg. The words echoed in the cavern of my skull, reframing a decade of silent, indifferent oppression into something far more terrifying. We weren't being conquered, we were being repurposed. Our world was soil, our cities were fertilizer, and we were the insignificant bacteria being sterilized before the planting of a new, alien seed. The deep, guttural hum of the pillar intensified, the platform vibrating with the first stirrings of the plasma vent. The giant metal louvers above us groaned open, revealing a dark, cavernous throat that pulsed with a faint, hellish red light. The air grew hot, the wind now a searing draft from the pillar's guts. Our window was open. "It doesn't change anything," I said, my voice hoarse, trying to convince myself as much as the others. "Whatever it's building, whatever it's birthing, we can't let it happen. We end it now." My hand was on the firing stud. My thumb was white against the cold metal. All I had to do was press it. But Maya grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "Wait, Alistair, look at the data," she implored, shoving her slate in front of my face. The schematic was changing. As the venting cycle began, the pillar's internal network, now less defended, was flooding her with information. The biological signature. It's not a single entity. It's symbiotic. There's the primary life form, the seed, but it's being incubated by a secondary system. A machine intelligence. A warden. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. The pillars, the sweepers, the scrubbers, they weren't the life form. They were the shell, the automated, unthinking, implacable machine built to protect and nurture the precious life growing within. The silent gods we had been fighting we're just the gardeners. If we destroy the pillar, Maya said, her voice trembling, we don't just kill the machine. We kill the child it's protecting. And the Warden intelligence. Its prime directive is to protect the seed at all costs. An attack on the pillar won't just be ignored. It will be interpreted as a direct threat to the life form. It will retaliate. Not with scrubbers. Not with automated responses. It will wake up. The warning came too late. Cortez, his face a mask of grief and rage for the fallen Gia, had seen my hesitation. Believing I was faltering, he made the decision for me. With a guttural cry of, "For Gia," he lunged past me and slammed his own hand down on the firing stud. The next 90 seconds were a blur of sound and light and fury. The Lancet discharged its payload with a deafening, instantaneous crack, a sound that was less a bang and more a violent tearing of reality itself. A beam of pure, white-hot energy, no thicker than my arm, shot into the open maw of the conduit. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, a silent flash of incandescent blue erupted from deep within the vent, the color of a dying star. The feedback loop. It had worked. A deep, seismic shudder ran through the entire pillar. A groan so profound it felt like the planet itself was crying out in pain. The platform bucked violently beneath our feet, and we had to cling to the tripod of the Lancet to keep from being thrown into the abyss. The venting cycle aborted. The louvers began to slam shut with a screech of protesting metal, but the damage was done. A plume of black, acrid smoke, thick with the smell of vaporized alien alloys, began to pour from the wounded vent. We had hit it. We had made the god bleed. Our elation was a fleeting, toxic thing. As the shuddering subsided, a new sound began. A sound unlike any we had ever heard. It wasn't the hum of a machine. It was a wail, a high frequency, synthetic scream of pure, unadulterated rage that seemed to come from the very metal of the pillar, from the air, from inside our own heads. It was the Warden, awake and aware. "Oh God," Maya whispered, her face ashen. "What have we done?" The pillar's response was not methodical. It was wrathful. The surface of the monolith, once smooth and black, began to change. Hairline cracks of angry red light spread across its skin like a feverish rash. Panels slid open, revealing weapon emplacements we never knew existed. The scrubbers, dozens of them, stopped their patrols. Their blue lights vanished, replaced by the same hard, white light of the ones that had attacked Gia, and they began to converge on our position from all directions. The Lancet. I yelled over the rising scream. Reload it now. But there was no reload. The Lancet was a one-shot weapon, its power core depleted, its focusing lenses fractured from the sheer energy of the discharge. It was now just 100 pounds of useless scrap metal. Our only chance was to run. "Down, everybody, down," I commanded, shoving what was left of our climbing gear into their hands. "Move." We abandoned the platform, rappelling down our lines in a desperate, chaotic descent. Above us, the pillar was transforming into an engine of war. Laser turrets, emerging from hidden ports, began to fire, not at us, but at the sky. Beams of coherent energy sliced through the orange haze, targeting something in high orbit. A moment later, streaks of fire rained down across the horizon. The pillar was shooting down its own satellite's communication relays, orbital sensors, a scorched earth tactic to blind itself, to ensure nothing interfered with its local extermination protocol. It was isolating the battlefield. Us. The scrubbers reached the platform seconds after we abandoned it, swarming over the Lancet and dismantling it with furious, plasma-cutting efficiency. Then they came for us. They were no longer maintenance drones. Their programming had been rewritten. They descended the wall not in sweeping paths, but in direct, suicidal plunges, firing their plasma torches as they came. Beams of blue energy sliced the air around us, striking the pillar's hull with explosive force, sending shards of hot metal flying. We were spiders on a grill, with nowhere to hide. Ben was our shield. As a scrubber dove towards Maya, he swung his body into its path, absorbing the plasma blast on his armored backplate. The armor glowed white-hot, but held. With a roar of defiance, he used his momentum to swing on his line, kicking out with his heavy magnetic boots and smashing the drone into the wall. It shattered into 1,000 pieces, but there were too many. Cortez, climbing below me, cried out as a plasma beam severed his rope. He managed to grab onto a conduit, his hands smoking from the heat, but a second scrubber was on him in an instant. It didn't cut his line. It drove its torch directly into his chest. He fell without a sound. We were 4. We descended in a controlled fall, a desperate flight down the vertical face of a waking monster. The pillar's scream never ceased, a constant psychic pressure that made it hard to think, to focus. Below us, the exclusion zone, once clear and sterile, was now churning. The ground itself seemed to ripple, and from beneath the black, polished surface, new defenders emerged. Tall, spindly, insectoid machines unfolded themselves, their limbs like obsidian knives. Sentinels, ground troops. They're sealing the perimeter, Maya yelled, pointing down. We'll never make it back to the pig. She was right. The path to our escape vehicle was now blocked by a newly birthed army of alien killers, but my eyes were fixed on something else. The force field of the exclusion zone was flickering. The damage to the pillar's core, the massive energy drain from its awakening defenses, it had made the field unstable. It was our only chance. "Not to the pig," I yelled, my mind racing. "The storm drains, the subway entrance we came out of, it's just outside the zone." It was a desperate gamble. We would have to cross the 1,000-yard kill zone again, this time with an army at our backs and a flickering, unpredictable energy field in front of us. There was no other choice. We hit the ground running, our boots crunching on the obsidian floor. Behind us, the sentinels were giving chase, their movements unnervingly fast, their bladed limbs scything through the air. Ahead, the exclusion zone's perimeter shimmered and sparked, a wall of violent, unstable energy. "We have to go through," I shouted. Now, the first of the sentinels was almost upon us. It lunged for Ben, its forelimb a silver blur. Ben didn't dodge. He turned, met the charge, and threw his entire body into the machine, a human battering ram against an alien killing machine. The impact was horrific. The sentinel's blade pierced Ben's suit and buried itself deep in his shoulder, but his momentum carried them both backward, tumbling over and over, away from Maya and me, buying us the precious seconds we needed. I grabbed Maya's hand and pulled her with me as we ran towards the flickering field. "I can't see his vitals!" she cried, her eyes streaming with tears as she looked back at the tangled struggle of man and machine. "Alistair, we have to help him. He made a choice." I screamed, the words tearing my throat. "Don't let him waste it. Run." We reached the edge of the zone just as the field flared, a wave of pure energy pulsing outwards. We dove through a momentary gap. hitting the dusty ground on the other side. The air outside the zone was thick and toxic, but it was the air of our world. I looked back and saw Ben, locked in a death struggle with the Sentinel, both of them now engulfed in the violent, electric aura of the exclusion zone. The last thing I saw was Ben's face, turned towards us. His mouth was open in a silent, final roar of defiance. Then his body, and the machine it was locked with, dissolved into a flash of brilliant, searing white light. He was gone. Maya collapsed, her body racked with sobs. I hauled her to her feet, my own grief a cold, hard knot in my chest. There was no time. The Sentinels were already finding ways around the unstable field. We could hear their sharp, clicking movements in the ruins behind us. I dragged her towards the dark, gaping maw of the subway entrance. We plunged into the darkness. The roar of the awakened pillar and the screams of its newborn army fading behind us. We were alive. 2 of us. We had failed to kill the god, and we had just given it a reason to learn our name. The darkness of the subway tunnels was absolute. A thick, smothering blackness that swallowed the light from our headlamps just a few feet from our faces. We ran, stumbling over the skeletal remains of those who had sought shelter here a decade ago, their bones crunching under our boots. Behind us, we could still feel the pillar's rage, a psychic vibration that resonated through the rock and concrete, a promise of relentless pursuit. We were no longer a team. We were 2 survivors, a ragged 2-person species, fleeing the wrath of a god we had wounded. We ran until our lungs were fire and our legs were lead, finally collapsing in a dusty, forgotten maintenance alcove. The only sounds were our own ragged breaths and the slow, steady drip of contaminated water from a cracked pipe. Grief was a luxury we couldn't afford, but it was there, a cold, heavy passenger. I saw Ben's face in the darkness every time I closed my eyes, his final, silent roar of defiance. I saw Gia and Cortez and the others, their faces etched with a hope that we had failed to honor. We had started a fire, just as Evans had asked. Now it was burning us all alive. It's still broadcasting, Maya whispered, her voice a raw, broken thing. She was huddled over her data slate, its pale light illuminating the tear tracks on her dust-streaked face. The wail. It's not just noise. It's a signal. A Priority 1 distress call. Layered with a command directive. A directive for what? I asked. My voice flat, empty. To kill us. To sterilize us. She corrected, her eyes wide with a chilling understanding. The directive identifies us our specific biosignatures as a Class A pathogen, a contamination. The Sentinels aren't just hunting us. Alistair, they are following a quarantine protocol. They won't stop. They will never stop until the pathogen is eradicated. The finality of her words was a door slamming shut. There was no escape. We could run back to Cheyenne Mountain, but we would just be leading the infection home. The warden, now fully awake and aware of our species, would hunt us down and scour the mountain from the face of the planet to ensure its child was safe. Our desperate act of defiance had just signed the death warrant for the last 3,000 humans on Earth. I slumped against the cold concrete wall, the weight of my failure crushing me. We had traded a slow, quiet death for a fast, violent one. I pulled out the tarnished Zippo Evans had given me, turning it over and over in my numb fingers. A tool for starting a fire. We had done that. All right. We had lit a bonfire that would consume everything. But there's something else. Maya said, her voice dropping to a whisper. Underneath the command directive, buried in the raw data of the distress call, there's another layer. Not a command, a state of being. The warden isn't just broadcasting rage, it's broadcasting fear. I looked up. Fear. It's terrified, she said. Her own fear momentarily replaced by scientific awe. Its prime directive is to protect the seed, but our attack introduced a variable it cannot compute. The feedback loop we triggered didn't just damage the plasma conduits, it sent a sympathetic resonance wave through the entire structure, directly into the incubation chamber. The seed is unstable. The warden isn't screaming because we heard it. It's screaming because we might have hurt the baby. A crazy, impossible idea began to form in the ruins of my mind, a sliver of light in the absolute darkness. It thinks we're a pathogen, I said, thinking aloud. A virus attacking its child. That's why it's trying to sterilize us. Exactly, Maya affirmed. Its response is absolute, a massive, overwhelming immune reaction. So, what if? I continued, the idea feeling more and more like a desperate prayer. What if we could show it that we're not a virus? What if we could show it that we're something else? Maya stared at me, her mind racing ahead, connecting the dots. You mean, communicate? We can't fight it, I said, the plan solidifying, the sheer suicidal insanity of it giving it a strange kind of clarity. We tried that. Look where it got us. But we're not what it thinks we are. It sees a threat to its child. We have to show it that we are also life, cornered, desperate, terrified life. The plan was simple. It was the most dangerous thing we could possibly do. We had to go back. We had to walk out of the tunnels, back across the kill zone, and present ourselves to the warden, not with a weapon, but with an offering. For the next hour, Maya worked feverishly on the slate. She couldn't hack the warden's mind, but she could create a broadcast packet, a small, tight beam transmission she could project from her device. It wouldn't contain words. It would contain pure information, the double helix of human DNA, a holographic representation of a beating human heart, the complex neural wiring of a human brain, and finally, using the last of the slate's power, she rendered the only thing she could think of that was universal a star chart, centered not on our sun, but on the pulsar she had studied before the world ended, a silent declaration that we, too, looked at the stars and wondered. The walk back to the surface was the longest of our lives. We weren't a strike team anymore. We were pilgrims, walking toward a furious god we hoped to pacify. When we emerged from the subway, the world was chaos. The sentinels were everywhere, methodically glassing the ruins, turning rubble into molten slag. The pillar itself was a terrifying spectacle, its surface alive with a pulsating red energy, its scream a constant thrum in the air. We didn't hide. We walked out into the open, into the sterile zone, our hands raised. The nearest sentinels stopped their work instantly. They turned, their bladed limbs clicking into attack posture, their optical sensors glowing with malevolent light. They began to advance on us, a slow, deliberate march of executioners. Now, Maya, I whispered, my heart hammering against my ribs. She raised the slate, pointing it at the pillar, and activated the broadcast. A pale blue beam of light shot from the slate. Not a weapon, but a projection, painting our packet of information onto the roiling, energy-wreathed surface of the pillar. For a moment, nothing happened. The sentinels kept coming. 20 yards. 10. I closed my eyes, bracing for the searing pain of their blades. It never came. I opened them to see the sentinels frozen in place, their limbs locked, their glowing eyes fixed on us. The psychic scream of the warden faltered. It didn't stop, but it changed. The overtone of rage softening into something else, a query. A wave of pure, concentrated curiosity. The red light pulsing across the pillar's skin subsided, returning to its impassive black. The silence, when it came, was the most profound sound I had ever heard. It was a silence not of absence, but of attention. The warden was listening. We stood there for an eternity. Two small, fragile creatures in the shadow of the silent monolith. We had no idea if our message had been understood, or if we had just delayed our own execution. Then, a low hum emanated from the pillar's base. A section of the seamless black wall dissolved, not opening like a door, but dematerializing, revealing a softly lit corridor leading into the machine's interior. It was an invitation, an offering of trust in response to ours. We had a choice to run back to the mountain with our lives, or to step into the heart of the unknown. We walked forward, into the light. The journey home, 2 days later, was surreal. The choke was still there. The sky was still a bruised orange, but the silence from the pillar was a profound and permanent change. The sentinels had returned to the earth. The exclusion zone had vanished, and the scrubbers on the pillar's hull once again glowed with a soft, passive blue. The war, the one we had started, was over. When we stumbled through the blast doors of Cheyenne Mountain, we were greeted not as heroes, but as ghosts. Evans was the first to reach us. He looked at me, then at Maya, his eyes counting the empty spaces where the rest of our team should have been. "What happened?" he asked, his voice thick with a decade of held-back emotion. We told him everything about the nursery, the warden, the rage, and the final, desperate act of communication. We told him that humanity was no longer a pathogen to be cleansed, but a known quantity, a factor in the pillar's equation. We hadn't won. We had achieved a truce. Our world was no longer exclusively ours, but it was, for the first time in 10 years, a world where we might have a future. That night, I stood alone on the observation deck, looking out at the dark shape of the pillar on the horizon. It was still there, a silent, alien god in our backyard. The child inside was still growing. I had no idea what would happen when it was finally born. But as I looked up at the sky, I thought I could see a star, a tiny pinprick of white light in the oppressive orange haze. It may have been a trick of my tired eyes, or it may have been a promise. We had not reclaimed our world, but we had earned our place in it. We were no longer just survivors. We were neighbors. And for the first time in a long, long time, the silence didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a beginning.